Antigone Retold, the Woza Habibi Tour, is a cross-continental collaboration that makes the marginalized mainstream using easy-to-recognize pop culture references. Through the lens of Greek mythology, Antigone Retold brings women whose stories have been relegated to the shadows into the spotlight. This version of Antigone brings otherwise disenfranchised heroines to the forefront and gives them agency to tell their own stories. But enough from me. Let's speak to the founder and creative director of the collab company, Lauren Noble, who joins us in a studio with a little performance to follow a little on. Lauren, thank you so much for your time. Tell us, what was the genesis for this production and why in Dubai?
Yes, so the genesis of this production was actually in Athens. One of my bucket list items was to visit the Theatre of Dionysus in Athens. And I remember going to the museum, and literally as you step foot in the front lobby of the museum, I turned to the side and there was a group of women who are essentially pillars holding up an item above their head. But there was very, very clearly one pillar missing. And I was really intrigued because these women are known as the caryatids, and they essentially held up the various buildings in ancient Greece. And there was one sister missing, and I was really intrigued by her story. I wondered where she was and why she had become, so far removed from the rest of her sisters. And it sparked an idea in my mind about potentially revisiting an ancient Greek text from 2,500 years ago and essentially bringing it into the 21st century. So I'm a huge advocate for bringing theatre into the 21st century because it's such a different world from a lot of what I learned even 20 years ago. And so the opportunity to basically come up with a concept around a sisterhood, a group of women who essentially have been disenfranchised and had not had the ability to tell their own tale, to reclaim that narrative for themselves. And so I started thinking about who those could be, and Medusa, Pandora, Aphrodite popped into my head. And then I wondered how close we could match those against celebrities who in the 21st century have had much the same story. And we started making those links, and so we then came up with a huge pop culture extravaganza that manages to blend a little bit of ancient Greek and a little bit of the modern world.
You use the quote in talking about your production, history is written by the victors. And as with much storytelling we've seen over the years, even if you go back to the Bible and Greek mythology and the list goes on, those are the victors who are also writing those stories and telling the story from their perspective. And therefore, even though this piece is from 2000, or stories are from 2,500 years ago, did it hit you and the team that you got together about how relevant it still is today?
Yes, I think that was one of the fundamental conversation starters when we first started devising around all of these different characters. One of the first conversations that we had was just how shocking it is that we are literally sitting with a text that is 2,500 years old, and we have the capacity to really not change much about that version. In adding to it, that was a slightly different story. So a lot of our devising added to the existent text, but the fact that it exists 2,500 years later and we're having the same conversations, that for me is a problem. And the way that I often deal with problems in my kind of existence is through the theatre, because I just love the medium. And so the opportunity to just come up with a concept where essentially all we did was remove the stories that were told by the chorus of 49 men, and we basically said, right, we've heard from you for 2,500 years. We think it might be time to actually have a conversation with the women that we haven't chatted to, because people like Medusa in mythology fascinate me. Her story, the way that she was disenfranchised, the fact that there is a story, a history of violation that occurs to her, and she is then held accountable for that, even though the male counterparts that actually were involved in her tale ended up basically getting off scot-free because they were gods. And so having that opportunity to weave that storyline in was really, really phenomenal, and yes, super relevant.
You trained and I think born and bred in Durban, ended up in Dubai, where you founded the collab company who's behind this production. How has this piece been received in a place like Dubai? And you've gone on to travel quite a bit around the world with the production.
Yeah.
How has it been received?
It's been received really well. I think one of the first things that we had decided was Dubai obviously has a very, very different theatrical culture than South Africa. In many respects, my history in the theatre classroom, which is where I actually started in Dubai, I moved over to start up a drama department in an international academy, and having the opportunity to engage with the students at their level and actually start to understand that there was so much opportunity in Dubai to really take a lot of the lessons that were learned from Durban, which is very holistic in its methodology in terms of theatre. So a lot of us that are working on the production are from UKZN, born and bred, and really it is a very different methodology. And so to take that through into Dubai and work with it there, it has been really special because it's kind of given essentially a South African flavour in the middle of Dubai. And I think there's something that resonates with a lot of people, because the thing that South Africans do really well, particularly in the theatre industry, is we are very communal. We share, we engage with one another, we share platforms. We don't just take the platform for ourselves. And so to bring that into Dubai, I think it was a very different engagement than had maybe come before. And so people really responded well, to the point where we had a wonderful immersive theatre experience in a Museum Mawahib is what we ended up calling it. It was essentially an art gallery for people of determination. So those are disabled individuals in Dubai, and they basically gifted us the space as a venue and said, you can make of it what you wish. And so that was exceptionally wonderful, because to see the audience engage with theatre so close up was really great. But on top of that, we had members in the audience who then approached us much later and said, we would love for you to basically reimagine this exact production in an amphitheatre, which is known as the Mohammed bin Rashid Library. And this amphitheatre is an outdoor amphitheatre, much like the theatre. Which of course
makes it a full circle moment for your Athens Genesis. Yeah.
Exactly, and it was such a special moment because we also got the opportunity to perform for the Dubai royal family. So there are members of my cast and crew that would have never had this opportunity had it not been for this theatrical medium that kind of brought us all together.
Why was it important for you then, when you do bring it, when you decided to bring this piece to South Africa, to perform in Durban, A, and B, is it going to be emotional? Because if at the core of your story is about disenfranchised women, and we know what a big story and an ongoing story that is in South Africa about women being disenfranchised, historically and right now in various ways, how are you going to approach that for this local audience, for whom this might strike a very, very important chord?
Yeah, and so it showed. That is such a lovely question. Thank you. First of all, coming back to Durban, it is a full circle moment. So that is actually the full circle moment for a lot of us working on the production. So having a team that is kind of based off of new and young creatives, and then our kind of group that have gone on to do a variety of things within creative industries that aren't necessarily directly related to theatre, but theatre is still a passion. We've all kind of come together, and the main idea behind that was really Sasha, my choreographer, and I sitting over a coffee in Dubai and saying, where do we go next? What do we do now? And we immediately said one of our fundamental aims in the company, being in Dubai, was to take some of the skills that we had learned there and actually bring them back home. And for us, that's particularly important. So to actually now work with a South African-based bunch of creatives, it is phenomenal, because everyone is so giving and generous, and the opportunity to actually reimagine a lot of the tales for a South African audience has been one of the best experiences of this entire 4-month period. And I think for us, it was really significant that in the story there is the muse of epic poetry. Her name is Calliope. She essentially brings together this group of women, wakes them up from their slumber, and provides a platform. She says, I'm going to step back, I'm going to give you my platform, and I'm going to get you to tell your tale that has stood silent for so long. I feel like in many respects the actual production is doing that. It's literally saying, we're going to cast new individuals, new faces, and let's actually hear what you think about the story we've kind of assigned to you. Do you agree with it? Is there anything you would change? Would you want to shift anything? And so predominantly we've now looked at this new version as a completely new version, because it is South African at heart. It's got a lot of items that are a lot more, I would say perhaps a lot more vocal about some of the things that that perhaps are not as prevalent in Dubai, that are a lot more prevalent to the conversations amongst people in South Africa. And I think gender-based violence is a huge problem. It has not shifted. And for me, the only way that we can bring these stories to a bigger audience is to basically say something that we were taught at university: the personal is political.
Sure.
So engaging someone politically, yes, some people enjoy that, but a lot don't. But to actually make a story personal, for someone to sit in an audience and go, I actually now understand what they've been trying to tell us in the bigger scheme of things, but because they've now represented it in a goddess on stage who is getting to tell her tale, that's huge. I can't imagine.
And really the importance and the role of art over the ages, hasn't it? To hold up a mirror and say, this is what you're not seeing. Lauren, thank you so much for coming in to tell us about this amazing project. We wish you and your team everything of the best. Founder and creative director of Collab Company, Lauren Noble, in studio with us. Antigone Retold, the Woza Habibi Tour, on at the Elizabeth Snedden Theatre in Durban from the 19th until the 28th of July. And you can book those tickets on CompuTicket or just Google them. I'm sure those details will come up. And do stay with us. There will be a performance from this production a little later on. But now it's time for sports.